hide the poll, and make you presenter, Jason.
Sounds excellent.
All right, everyone, have a great session.
All right. Looks like everyone can see the screen. So we're here today to talk about data lifecycle optimization with Pragmatic, which works pretty well because we got a couple of us here in the presentation here today. Myself, Jason Straight. If you have questions afterwards, you can reach me. I got my contact information up there. I've been working with SQL Server here for a number of years, so I've been around the block a few times. With me is Anthony Martin. Anthony, if you want to introduce yourself real quick.
Yes, hi everyone, Anthony here. I'm Jason's counterpart as Solutions Architect at Pragmatic. Like Jason, I also have several years, over a dozen years of experience working with the SQL Server and the Microsoft Data Platform.
All right. So what we're here today is to talk about data lifecycle optimization. And one of the things that leads into this is that there's been a huge change in the way that we see data and get data and view data within our environments, not just at work, but also within our personal lives. And there's data just coming everywhere from us, from social networks, from sensor information, stoplights, drills that are out in oil fields. All this data is constantly coming back. Airplanes are constantly sending back information. And so we've got all this data that's coming at us from all these different places. And oftentimes when we talk about this data, we talk just about data warehousing. But it goes much further beyond that because it is actually the data platform as a whole. And the things that have kind of changed with this data platform is that the ability to ingest and work with this data has just changed dramatically over just the last few years. Storage is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and even though people say, hey, storage is cheap, but sand's expensive, the reality is that if you start to look at the way in which storage as an industry is going, it's getting a lot less expensive. Right now, if you look at some of the cloud storage vendors and what they're offering for cloud storage for cloud deployments, it's getting really close to zero. It's not quite zero yet. You still have to pay a little bit, but it's really driving down that cost. The other thing is that we're seeing is that from a commodity machine perspective, the costs for doing computing is getting much less expensive, and we're able to do much more with extremely lower amounts of investments. And so that kind of builds into this trend where the value of data is becoming much more important. Now, data has always been important. I have many stories where I've talked to people about how there's a pet store that was in Seattle for a while, and that pet store just didn't take backups, or there's a company that a buddy of mine was working with in Australia where they put all of the data into a single table. The first time that you go through one of those problems with the system, and this isn't just about big data, this is about the small data as well. You don't get your backup, the business is done. If you don't have a way to get to the data, the business is done. And so as we've seen more and more data show up, we're also seeing that we want to do more with it. So not only do we have to make sure that we have the foundation for the basis of the data, we also have to make sure that we're leveraging the value of that data. There's a lot that you can do with data, from historical analysis all the way up to predictive forecasting. One of the very first projects I ever worked with was taking an Access database that had been derived from a mainframe program, and instead of throwing the data away every day, just keeping it for one more day. And after we had that data for a while, 30, 40 days worth of that data, we could start to do some predictive analysis on this. And this was 15 years ago. And back 15 years ago, to be able to do these kinds of projects was a real big pain. But we were able to do predictive analysis on that data to find out, as we're doing these merchant fraud analyses, what it would take to do that. And as we go through here today and talk about data lifecycle optimization, we're going to talk a little bit about how the world has really changed, and we're able to derive that value out of that system without having teams of 10, 20, 40 people to be able to get to that point. Back in 1997, when we were throwing together analytics on merchant fraud, it was a 20-person team digging through and having to use very expensive software. So the modern data platform has been changing quite a bit. We hear a lot about this from Microsoft with their cloud-first, mobile-first plan, but that does tie into what we're seeing today. Whether you're going on-premise or in a cloud architecture, the modern data platform does have a lot of components where you can take your relational data, you can extract and transform and load that, and bring it into non-relational or analytic. You have relational data that's coming from one of your applications that you need to stream out to a non-relational engine or location so you can do predictive analysis on it. The modern data platform has really changed, and so that it is really this seamless blend between your production data, the data that you're generating for your application, and the analytics that you're putting on top of it. It's really sad to say, and this is one of those things that I resisted for a really long time. One guy I used to work with, he's a local consultant here in Minnesota, used to tell me everything's business intelligence. And I was always, no, it's not. And we're getting to the point in the world where everything actually could be considered business intelligence, but not really. I mean, you've got your relational engine, and what he was saying in that statement is that it doesn't just end with your relational engine. It's not just your OLTP engine, and it's not just the OLTP data. It's not just the data mart. The two need to blend back into each other, and you need to get the most out of that platform that you can. And that's kind of the thing that we're running into, but we're running into a lot of roadblocks. As we start to blend these platforms together and try to get more out of them to make the most out of our platform, we're running into a number of roadblocks. We've got legacy systems that are already in place, and those legacy systems, we've put effort into building them out, and they do, and a lot of them have limited scale. There's a lot of customers that we work with that, getting to that next level and getting to that next place really is a barrier. And the other thing is, that thought about building out a big data solution on top of the data that you've been collecting. You may have a front-end OLTP system that you store 90 or 180 days of data in. What do you do with that data after you're archiving it out? Is it still readily available? Does it need to be fed into a big data system? Or does it need to be just